kick things off here over on the BetMGM side of things when we are talking about, hey, look, we knew it was going to cost, it was going to be expensive to play in New York, and BetMGM, I guess, just wants everyone to know that.
Well, I guess BetMGM is into stating the obvious these days, because we looked at the New York tax structure right when it came out, 51% tax rate, the highest in the nation, and said, we're not sure how anyone's going to make any money in New York. And yet, the thing we have to keep in mind is that 9 sports books agreed to pay this. And in fact, there were more applicants than the state of New York actually chose to put into the market. So 51% is the agreed upon tax rate for everyone. Well, what we've started to hear is, of course, we heard from Caesars a while back that they were going to cut their heavy promotional spend that they were doing in New York. They didn't tie it directly to New York's tax rate, but we know that there's a high cost of doing business in New York in the first place. And then on BetMGM's investor call this week, they gave some quotes that to me sounded like, well, what did you expect? They essentially said, well, the house can't always lose, and that it's not an environment that's sustainable when it comes to the tax rate in New York. Okay, fair. No one involved in this believes that 51% is a reasonable tax rate for the state of New York. But the problem here is you proposed it, you agreed to it. What do you think anyone is going to do when you come back and say, we can't afford it? They're going to laugh, and they're going to say, okay, well, you had a chance to say you didn't want to pay this tax rate in the first place. And look, we understand, as people who are inside this bubble every day, that the game plan was to agree to the tax rate, deal with it for a couple of years, and then come back to the legislature and try to change it later. But here's the problem you're going to encounter. And guys, we've discussed this on the podcast before. The success that we've seen in New York, the fact that it's generating close to the revenue projection for the state of $500 million in tax revenue, I can't imagine who in New York is going to be amenable to the companies coming back and saying, hey, we need to pay less. They're going to say, no, we like what you're doing right now.
So, Dustin, it almost feels like a game of chicken, right? Because, I mean, the books, I guess, in theory, could pull out of the state. But then if they pull out of the state, then their competitors stay, and then they have more of the market share, and then more of the money, and then maybe it doesn't really matter if there's a 51% tax rate and all this. And so it's kind of like the books are sitting here going, no, you blink, and I know you blink. It's the whole Spider-Man thing kind of going on, pointing at each other here. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like, at least if you're a New York legislator right now, that there is a lot of priority in trying to change the structure.
Yeah, there's zero priority. You also took I was going to lead with it's a giant game of chicken, right? That is, you hit the nail on the head. Why am I even here? I can just retire. Matt can do the analysis for me. But yeah, it's like, you don't want to be in, and it's a game of chicken with the state too. Like, okay, you're gonna stop promoting it. So like you could, if all the companies kind of pull back in New York, then you're going to stop seeing growth and maybe even pull back in New York if they're legit and saying we're going to stop marketing spend, we're not going to really try to grow the market anymore, and then New York may say, oh, okay, what's going on? Maybe we do need to reduce the tax rate. Like, is any of that really going to work? I don't know, but yeah, it at core is a giant game of chicken between the state and the books and other books that are there. Like, are you just willing to say, yeah, we're going to lose market share in New York, the biggest state in the country, because with legal sports betting, because it's not sustainable? Like, you're still trying to show a growth plan, and for a future state where New York maybe isn't that kind of a high tax rate. So who knows? But yeah, I agree with you. Nobody's coming back and fixing this rule, this law right away, because they're going to take the money for now, and things get dire or people start pulling out or the numbers don't look as good, then maybe we'll see some change in New York.
Yeah, I mean, Adam, it seems to me like you kind of take a look at this, and it's one of those deals where it would take almost everybody getting together at the same time and saying, hey, we're all going to pull out together, right? We're doing this together, and we're all going to pull out, and then they'll have to work with us. But that is, as you and I well know, that is never going to happen.
You vote for me and I'll vote for you, right? Yeah, right. No, it never works out that way. And we've already heard from companies like FanDuel that not only is FanDuel leading the market in New York, But we've heard from FanDuel overall, we're going to get into this when we talk about earnings calls, that FanDuel's continuing with an aggressive customer acquisition plan. Like, they have no plans to pull back. And if you want to cede market share right now, Peter Jackson, the CEO of Flutter, has already said, we will be happy to take that market share that you are willing to give up. So you look at New York's situation, and Dustin mentioned, from the legislative side, look, they looked at this year. They looked at adding more licenses this year. They looked at saying, okay, maybe we'll add 5 this year, 7 within 2 years. And then when it was brought up by our Matthew Waters and others to say, well, that means that you would drop the tax rate to 35%. That's what the Matrix says, right? And then Senator Addabbo et al. Said, oh, well,
wait
I don't
a
know that
minute.
we're much interested in lowering that tax rate right now. So, yeah, if everyone were to pull out, Matt, of course, it would affect things. But there are other questions to be answered here that go a lot deeper that we're not going to be able to get into today. And Caesars is going to be the interesting test case, I think, for this. What is the lifetime value of a player that you acquire in New York, right? How hard do you have to work to keep that player at potentially a lower cost than acquiring a new player? Does New York ever do iGaming? And if New York ever does do iGaming, then how can you increase the lifetime value of that player that you already brought in for sports betting, which maybe makes it so that you don't need to spend the same amount of money bringing customers? So there are a lot of questions to be answered here right now. But I think the one we can answer definitively is, are the New York legislators going to come back and change the tax rate that the sports books agreed to 5 months ago? No, they're not.
The tax rate is too damn high. That's what they're screaming. The tax rate is too damn high.
The tax rate that we wanted.